Sweet. Okay. Hi. So I'm James. I'm on the open source team at Meteor Development Group, working on Apollo. And since it's the first GraphQL NYC, we figured we should like bring some whole brand new stuff. So that's why Sasha goes like, we finished this last night at like, or I guess probably today over lunch, but like 4 a.m. last night. Kind of got schema stitching working. And in the same vein, we want to kind of like early demo, big announcement for Apollo Client 2.0. Big woo! Yeah. Early plug for Summit. The full 2.0 talk will be at Summit. But yeah, so this is great. So we want to kind of preview it for everyone. So yeah, hello, I'm James. That's a nice slide for that. So first, a couple questions. Who here is using GraphQL in their apps right now? Okay. Who is using Apollo? All right, I like to see that. Cool. And who's using React with Apollo? Anybody not using React with Apollo? I guess I should ask. Okay, cool. Well, good. That's a good audience. Yeah, I wrote the React integration, so I have a preference clearly there. But I want to talk about like what you're working on right now with Apollo Client 1.0 and how 2.0 is going to make your app faster and more powerful without you having to rewrite your app. Because we really care about you and we're thankful that you're using Apollo 1.0. So we want to make that upgrade really easy. So first, a little bit of history about what the 1.0 was. So we started Apollo in like early spring of, I want to say like 2016. And the idea was to try and bring GraphQL to apps in a really easy way. That like didn't have a full build step and was kind of really easy to incrementally adopt. Something you could try out in like a small portion of your app and kind of get hooked on GraphQL because it's easy to do that. And like, so we shipped it early and then we started to get a whole bunch of feedback and we fixed a whole bunch of bugs. And the 1.0 was kind of really about stabilizing what that experience looked like. Because we had a lot of people going to production. So we wanted to make sure that that 1.0 was kind of rock solid. And so it was like stabilize the core experience around like putting GraphQL in your app, whether that was Angular, Vue, React, kind of whatever you wanted to. So we wanted to also make it really easy. So we kind of shipped everything that you would need to use GraphQL from the beginning, right? So we had a network layer, so you could make HTTP requests. We could like you could batch them together, so it's more efficient. Once subscriptions landed, we had like a subscription transport, so you could use GraphQL subscriptions because they're really awesome. We had a caching layer because we want your app to be really performant, and you don't want to like re-render every time you like navigate around because that's not a good experience. And we had a core manager that's kind of like the heart of Apollo clients. To make all that easy for you, to handle things like scheduling, polling of queries, to update all your React components. We had a React integration. So like Apollo client shipped with all these things that were, I think, pretty well designed, but they were kind of like the main use case that we found that everyone's running into. So after we shipped the 1.0, we started hearing about all these like, hey, we really like Apollo client, but it doesn't do this. And like, we really need it to do this. So can you like add this thing so it can do this? And we're like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. Like 1.1, we'll add your thing. And so it was like, hey, can you add my thing too? I'm like, yeah, thanks. I'll help you. Okay, cool. Let's do it. So like 1.2. And we're like 1.7, 1.11, and now we're like, I don't really even remember why this is in there. It's cool. Someone's using it, so we don't want to like break that. So it gets a lot harder to make Apollo client smaller. So like if you want a little bit more of efficient, like maybe your app is a PWA, we don't want to ship over all of Apollo client. If you're not using subscriptions, then we kind of don't want you to have to load subscriptions. If you're not using batching, then we don't want you to load batching. Like that's not good for your users. But we couldn't really do that with 1.0, right? We kind of gave you everything, and if you didn't want it, like, sorry, just don't eat it kind of thing. So yeah, we had like query batching. We had these kind of like store update controls. We had like multiple ways after mutation to update your previous queries to kind of make it like automatic, which is kind of a hard problem to solve for everybody because everyone has different kind of needs there. So we're like, oh, shoot, now what do we do? So then like, okay, maybe we need a 2.0. Maybe we need something, and we're like, okay, we can kind of like step forward into where we want to be able to continue to go without like breaking everyone's app that just moved to it. So like Apollo Client 1.0 is also built on Redux because Redux is a really incredible tool. And something like 80% of React developers use Redux. Who in here uses Redux if you use React? Cool. Who in here uses it a lot or like kind of just includes it? Great. I like to see that because Redux is really great, but sometimes it just gets included and people don't really know how to use it. And that stinks because Redux is amazing, but if you don't need it, then don't ship it. So the issue with Redux, though, is that if you use another data layer, or if you use MobX, anyone use MobX in here? Cool. So MobX is worth a look. It's a whole different like kind of idea for state management. It's really cool, but then you were loading MobX for your state, but also Redux for our state. And so you had like 2 state management and a data management layer. It's like, that's too much data. Come on. Or like, let's say you're in Angular and you want to use like ng store. You couldn't really do that. So we had all these extra features, and we had Redux on top of it, which is what we were using for managing the states, and that didn't really work. So with the 2.0, what we're trying to do is to make it really powerful for you to choose how you want to make your own GraphQL like client, essentially. Everybody gets their own Apollo client. It's not like the Apollo client anymore. It's your Apollo client. So with that, we're making 2 breaking changes. They're like really small, I promise. I'll show you. But instead of the network interface, we're using this new library that we wrote called Apollo Link, which is kind of really powerful. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we're allowing you to choose your own cache. And we're going to ship with a cache. So if you want to just keep using what the Apollo like core ships with, you can totally still do that. We still provide all that. You don't have to go like write your own store. But if you want to, please do, and we'll feature it because that would be awesome. Same thing for links. Like, go do that. So yeah, let's just like get into some code. So demos, much excited. Yeah, thank you, Sashka. So almost lost the computer. Sorry, it was too much excite. Yeah, so a couple nights ago, I spoke at React NYC, and I had an Apollo Client 1.0 app that was showcasing server-side rendering, which is, I think, one of the coolest, my favorite part about Apollo, because it was like a fun challenge to solve. So this was it. I mean, it was like the Star Wars API, which is like the hello world of GraphQL, like server-side rendered. So we had like, let's see, view page source, like there we go. We've got, shout out to the Emotion library for awesome CSS usage, recommended. But yeah, so this is like Apollo client, and here's like all of our prefetched data, and here's all of our like generated markup and everything. So this was the app from 2 days ago that was like server-side render with Apollo 1.0. But the reality is this is actually Apollo client 2.0. I updated it and redeployed it. So this is the 2.0 app, and you can like, you know, come in here and click and like, hey, the app kind of like still works for all that it does. So like, what change did that look like? You know, was that what I was working on till like 3 a.m.? And the answer was no, and I will show you why. So this is actually the pull request that updated it. This is some like, none of this stuff is important. This is like my presentation. But what really does matter is this file. Okay, can everybody see this? No. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, how's that? Better? Cool. Everybody in the back? Can you see it? Can you see it? Great. Okay. So yeah, this was Tuesday, and this is Thursday. So you can see it's like we actually like we saved 1 line of our code, so like we're reducing code. I'll make your apps lighter for you. Yeah. So right now, React Apollo, which is React integration, kind of like as a courtesy, it ships all of Apollo client for you. So instead, because we're using betas and we don't want to break everyone's current React app, which if you had automatic CI updates, I did that for like 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I fixed it. But yeah, so we just changed this and we get the new Apollo client. We keep the same old React Apollo, and then we use a link instead of a network interface. And then we get a cache that normally was inside Apollo. And so instead of creating an Apollo client with a network interface and some initial state, instead, we create it with, oh man, I should have flipped these because that's now like, yeah, anyway. So like, we'll just go down here, right? Those matching games. So now we have a link, which, you know, this looks pretty much the same right here. And then this is pretty much the same thing right here. And that's it. You just updated your entire Apollo app to 2.0. Yay, you did it, woo! Yeah, no application code will need to be changed. It'll all just work. It'll just get faster and better, hopefully. Help us test the alpha to make sure that's true. Yeah, so this is like, okay, cool. So this isn't really that important. Why would you call this a 2.0? Like, why would you do this? And the reality is, although this makes your current app work, what this doesn't show you is that it allows you to do so much more. all the things that you wanted to do, but you needed us to build, now everyone can build, and it can be specific to your app. So I'm going to do a couple demos to kind of show what that looks like. So I'm going to be like typing around a little bit, so I may have to drop the mic and pick it back up. Oh, look at you. You see, he's so sweet. Oh, this is not Vim. Sorry, hold on. Remember how to do this. Yeah. Pair presenting. You're so sweet. Okay, so this is a 2.0 branch. This is like what that pull request was. And I'm going to check out what other demos do I have. Okay, so we'll go with like logging. So if you use Redux before, you have like middleware, right, that can log all of your actions. So like you're debugging your app and you're trying to figure out like where did that state come from? That totally happens with GraphQL requests as well. Like you got like 30 components mounted and they're all trying to make requests and you can't like figure out where it's coming from. Anybody? 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 Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just bad at my job. Cool. So what we want to be able to do is just like make that work. Did this not update? No, it didn't. Sorry, wrong branch. This is what I get for trying to do like live code things. We'll go with local. Come on. Don't save. Sorry, I'm not used to VS Code, and so. Hey, here we go. Okay. So we're gonna look specifically at this little bit of code here. Okay. Can everybody see this? Okay. Yep. Cool. Okay. Thank you. So this uses Apollo Link, and so this is how you can like write middleware for your GraphQL execution. So Apollo Link uses observables instead of promises, which opens up a ton of opportunities that I'll kind of talk about in the future of the talk, or the end of the talk. But right now, it lets you kind of like do middleware and afterware in the same function. So instead of like writing multiple functions. So what you do with a link is you get an operation, and then you get like the next link in the chain, right? So it's like the next thing that's going to happen. So in this case, this is the logger, and then this is the actual HTTP request, okay, or the thing that's going to do that. So if you want to like console log out what operation is coming down and the variables that are coming along with it to make sure that they're correct, then you can just kind of write a link like this, and you can console log out everything that you want to see, including like pretty print out the query so your console shows you exactly what's happening. And the cool part is then this essentially is going to keep the chain going and execute the next stack. So in this case, it's going to like make the network request because that's the only other thing in the chain. And it's going to return back an observable, and then you can just like look over that data and then keep it going. So this is data return back. So this is an execution result. So this is the data, and then we can console log it out. So in practice, like your app boots up, and then your console just fills up with all of your results. And you can add things like performance monitoring in this, or let's say that you want to integrate a tool like Sentry to error handle. You can just write a link there and say that if you get any errors, then report it to Sentry. Or let's say that you get a network request because you're offline, then you can do something here about being offline. So Apollo Client 2.0 gets you the ability to write offline support into your app, which is like really, really powerful. Another thing that this gets, and this is entirely the work of a contributor. So Ian, thank you very much. I hope you're okay with me demoing this code. It is public, so I feel like that's probably okay. Okay, let's see. Apollo Cache Hermes, which I think is his like wonderful little inside joke at the Greek god side of Apollo instead of the spaceship. But so this is a new cache implementation. So we've been working with Ian. He's been like contributing and kind of like helping us to shape what that API looks like. And even before the first alpha, he was like npm linking and like riding that edge and trying to build new caching systems. And this caching system is so much faster than like what ours is, because he's optimized it entirely for his company's product, which has these like huge data sets, and he's made it work just right for that. And so like the goal is something like this. You can just npm install whatever I need for my app. You know, so if my app is like really heavy data sets, maybe I want something like this, or maybe my app's all about like cache eviction and like fine grained control. I could just like hopefully search one day for Apollo cache with eviction kind of thing and just add that as my caching system as well. So like this is already out there, and it's going to be, I think, a really huge part of the ecosystem going forward. And then since Sashko went first, which I appreciate, because I kind of like stole his code, which I do a lot, to show another thing. So we talked earlier about using Redux and MobX, and a lot of times most applications have kind of a little bit of client-side state, but you have to bring a whole state management library in. So unless you're building like a really intensive like game or kind of like collaborative workspace editor, you know, you want to show some modals, you want to play some music, you want to like have a chat app and like open and show the window. Like not a ton of things, but enough you need some kind of like global state management system, because otherwise you're like setting state at the top of your tree and re-rendering everything, right? But the issue is your whole team has learned GraphQL and you like it, hopefully. If not, tell us. And so you want to just like keep writing GraphQL because it feels good and you got these really cool tools for it. But you can't do that for state management, right? You have to like dispatch or like update with MobX and that kind of stuff. So instead, with the benefit of schema stitching and Apollo Link, we can actually write an entirely client-side schema. So this is a schema using GraphQL tools. So it's just a little counter, right? We just have a query and a mutation to like upload and download it and have some state. And then I can just come in like, this is kind of like my local state, which, you know, probably isn't the best way to do it, but works for a demo. And then this is what's going to happen, right? So when you click upvote, it's just going to increment that state. Cool. Pretty easy to understand. So with this new GraphQL tools ability, we can come in here and we can actually make a remote schema and a client schema joined together. So this is on Launchpad. It's like, it's the books and authors example. And this is my local counter. Okay. So I'm just going to join them together. And then I have like a little link here that's going to like run through and execute those things. And then I just create my client. So what that lets you do is I can write these queries. So this query is going to hit local data and it's going to hit remote data. But if I'm looking at like the UI team, I don't actually really care where my data comes from a lot, right? I just want it to show up in my UI and I want to be able to bind events to it. Or maybe like I'm building a feature and it's like an MVP. So it's just client side right now. Like you can like something or follow it and it's just in your app. But then later you're like, you know what, that'd be really great if it like saved to the database so you can come back and revisit it. So cool, then you just remove it from your client side schema, move it to your server side, but you never change your UI code. You've just like magically made your app more powerful without rewriting any of it. You just remove code. And so then you just use like React Apollo, like you normally do, you just write it. And then you just write your UI component. So this is local data and this is remote data. And let's see if it's, let's see. This is the risky part. Nope, that's the wrong one. Come on. What? I should have. There it is. Sorry. Okay, so here's our little like counter. And let me make this larger for everybody. The giant counter by Tom. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, so ignore this checksum. That's my just like laziness. Okay, so this is that logger that I talked about earlier, right? So here's my operation, and here's my requests. So I had no variables, but it's this get data thing, right, that we showed you. And then here's the result. So like that's the logger in action working, which is really cool. Console group it, can print it out. It's kind of like, thank you. And this is local state, and this is remote state. And this is, in fact, React. I promise you it's not just like some HTML that I wrote to look real cool. Although at 3 a.m. last night, I was like, I'm just going to write some HTML and look really cool. Made it work. Yeah, so we have like our nice Apollo stack in there. So the really cool part, though, is I can go up and 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 up. And I'm just going to log out all these mutations. I'm not going to like send anything to the server. There's not going to be any network requests for this. Nothing's happening. It's all local state. It's all re-rendering my component. It's all GraphQL. It's all magic, right? This is so cool to me. Like I want to write everything like this because it's just Apollo. So those are like just some of the quick demos that we were able to make work once we had schema stitching last night. So the opportunities are kind of way more open to that. So I'm going to say some opportunities that I want like everyone here to help build because it's going to help all of us. So one of the first is offline support, right? We're going to build React Native apps, and you don't want to like go into the tunnel and then like you get the red screen of death because you had a network error. No one's going to use your app. Or you want to do a great PWA because that's really great for everybody, or you just want to have offline support. So we should be able together to write an offline link and just add it into your link stack and just npm install offline. It's kind of like the Webpack config, but for your full app with data. There's this idea in GraphQL called a deferred query, which says like, okay, I want to specify this query, but this is a really, really expensive field or selection set. So like, go ahead and give me the rest of the data, and then kind of like take your time, like go grab a beer, and then like bring me the data back when you get it. That's cool. So like with this link, you can. I think actually last night a contributor started writing it. Did he get it working? Yuri, do you know? Yeah, I think it's close. So he's written defer support into Apollo Link, and so we should all like help him write it and test it. So then we can just start using it. You just add the defer support link, and now Apollo client can do deferring. You can do live queries, do subscriptions. You can also, with Apollo Link, split the execution chain. So you can say like, hey, if this is a subscription, then send this to the WebSocket client. If not, use the HTTP client. Oh, and like the possibility there is pretty huge, right? If this is a mutation, then I want you to retry it 3 times. And if it still fails, then like send the error. Otherwise, just like keep trying it. Or if it's a query, I want to retry it. Or I want to like maybe save this into some offline state after I get it back. So there's a ton of opportunities that Apollo Client 2.0 is going to help us to get to. Oh, it's also almost 50% smaller than the current one. So yeah, thank you. That's my talk. Come to Summit, and we're hiring. Come work with us. How many questions? Yeah. Yeah.
Good question. So, can you introduce a little bit about like going to mutation and cache, how you evaluate the cache, like for 1.0 we use the reset before, and how about the
Yeah. So the question is, how with 2.0 are you going to like update the cache after mutation? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So part of the 1.0 API allows this function called let's see, update. So when you pass to a mutation in Apollo client, you can specify a cache updater, and this is going to get the store as it is in time when that mutation gets fired, and then it's going to, or sorry, when it gets fulfilled. And then it's going to get the data that like came back on the request. And so with this, you can like read the existing data in the store. And then you can manipulate the store however you want to, and then you can write it back to the store. So like if you are like maybe adding a to-do item to a to-do list, then you can get that data, and then you can just like add it to the end of the array of to-do list, and then save it back to the store. So that's actually part of the 1.0. So instead of having to reset store, you can like manually update the cache. And that stays totally working in 2.0. I know a lot of teams that really rely on this. We're working to make this better. If you have ideas, help us, please. But right now, it's pretty powerful. And then in terms of cache eviction, one of the things with those links and the new stores is you'll be able to, either from a link or from the store, set cache eviction policies if you want to. Like, so if the cache supports it, then you can write TTLs for like queries or fields, or maybe you want to have something a little bit more advanced. All that is going to be possible, and we kind of are interested to see the bounds of what happens there. So, cool. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So yes, you could have. So the current network interface has a use and a use after, and use function allows you to write middleware prior to a request happening, and the use after is like after the request. But the hard part is those don't share any scope unless you like set an upside like variable that you're going to iterate over, right? So there's no way to like take in scope. Let me just scroll up to it. Currently in 1.0, you can't like declare a variable in the use and then reference it in the use after, because they're different functions, unless you like go up a level in your JavaScript code. But yeah, with a 2.0, you totally can. And we're actually even going to most likely add in where the context, which is kind of like a way for you to send anything you want to any kind of link. So this is like the the public API for links. This is like controlled by Apollo, and this is an object that any link can add anything to. So we're even going to send this to the result map, and that way you can even pass stuff to other links who like maybe want to work on that context together. So, yeah. Oh, sorry. The question was, could you do the logger in the 1.0? Sorry. I forgot. Cool.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about you guys moving to observable.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, so the question was 2.0 is moving to observables. What are the benefits over promises? So one thing I want to say is that the current query and mutate API return promises, and those are going to stay the same. Because sometimes it's just really valuable to do like a one-time action and see what happens for it. But the benefit with observables is you're able to support things like retrying. And so like, I'm going to go through and it failed. So I'm just going to like maybe just send you a notice that it failed. Then I'm going to retry it. And the second time it's going to work. So I can like send that observable another like stream that says, hey, here's the actual data now. Same thing for like defer. I can give you back the first set of data we get from the server. And as new information comes in, I can keep playing it into your React components or however you're using it. So cool. Anybody else? Cool. So this is on the Apollo client repo. There's a pull request that says, do not merge Apollo client 2.0. Hopefully one day it'll say merge. But come help us. Come test the alpha. You can find me in the Apollo Slack. If you're interested in trying the 2.0, I can get you all set up and we can try it in your app. Thank you.